So we're going to start with a 1.4 solving absolute value review. For this first question, we have the absolute value of 3x plus negative 3x plus 5 plus 8 outside equal to 2. So if we go through the steps, my first step is to isolate. If I try to isolate my absolute value, it's very important that we highlight it first. That way we can see what's outside of it. Notice my plus 8 is outside, so that's what I need to get rid of. If I subtract 8, 8 minus 8 is a 0, so it goes away. Whatever we do on the left side of the equal sign, we have to do on the right side. So then my problem becomes absolute value of 3x plus 5 equal to negative 6. So now that my absolute value is isolated, I can try to solve this problem. But now that it's isolated, I have to check, hey, my absolute value is distance. Can distance equal a negative? Well, we can't travel negative distance. Like, you can't work. If you work backwards, you're still traveling positive distance. It's just a different direction. So because this is a false statement, distance cannot be negative. We're going to say that this is no solution. My answer for this one is no solution because my absolute value cannot equal a negative, cannot travel a negative distance. So for my second question, I have the absolute value of 5 minus x plus 2 equal to 2. We're going to start with the same steps. Isolate. Again, it's always important to highlight the absolute value so we can see where it's at. I have a 3 in front of it and a plus 2 after it. And so the question we have to ask ourselves is, how do I pick which one to get rid of first, the 3 or the 2? And so a lot of people are like, okay, so we can try to divide by 3, but if I divide by 3 here, I have to divide here and here, which will give me a decimal. But instead, if I subtract 2 here, I would only have to subtract it from here and here. It's just because the 3 is with the absolute value. Like, the 3 is with it. You cannot get rid of it yet. They're next to each other. They're together. So we're going to start with the minus 2. Now that gives me 3, 5 minus x equal to 0. Now I can try to get rid of the 3. In this case, because it's in front, it means it's being multiplied. The opposite is to divide. And that's how we isolate. So now that my problem is isolated, I can move on to my second step. Because absolute value can be 0. It cannot equal negative, but it can be 0. So we're going to try and separate into a negative and a positive. Here's my negative side. Here's my positive side. For the negative, I run into a little pickle because I cannot have negative 0. That's not doable, so this side is not going to work. But I can have a 0, like a regular 0. It doesn't have to be positive 0, it's a regular 0. For the positive side, if I want to get the x by itself, there's a 5 that I have to get rid of. It's positive 5, so I do the opposite and subtract. Now I'm almost close. I have negative x, I need positive x. So there is a negative 1 here I need to get rid of. I cannot add that 1 because it's not x minus 1. It's not x minus 1. If it was x minus 1, that's when I add the 1 because that would be the opposite. But here I have negative 1x. That means the negative 1 is multiplying the x. So the opposite would be to divide. And that's going to give me my positive 5 as my solution. So I only have one solution because, again, the negative side didn't work because of my 0. And I did forget to mention I solved from here. After I separated, I solved from here. So this is my solving step. Solve. Okay, so for question 3, it's a regular question. It's an easy question. For my first step, if I try to isolate, once you highlight, you're going to see that there's nothing outside my absolute value line. So it's already by itself. That means I can go ahead and separate. So here's my negative side. Here's my positive side. For my negative and positive, whatever I highlighted is going to stay the same. So whatever I highlight, it stays the same for both sides. X plus 6, it stays the same. But after the equals, for the negative, I do a negative, like right after the equals. So it's -2. For the positive, it's going to stay +2. For step 3, I am going to solve. Notice my absolute value lines are gone. If I'm going to solve, I need x by itself. There's this little +6 that's bothering me, so I do the opposite and subtract it. But I have to subtract 6 from both sides of the equal sign. When I do, -2 minus 6 gives me -8. I'm going to subtract it on the other problem too. So I do have two answers, -8 and -4. Okay. For the fourth question, we're going to write an equation for a minimum of 8 and a maximum of 18. So like this one, we're going to work it backwards. You have your two answers, 8 and 18, and we need to get the equation back. So we're going to use the equation formula, which is x minus the halfway equal to the distance from the halfway. So my halfway point is the point between 8 and 18. So I need to find what it is. For the halfway, I add both numbers and divide by 2. In other words, I find the average. So 8 plus 18 divided by 2, that's going to be 26 divided by 2, or 13. That's the point on the middle. And then I have to find the distance from the halfway. For the distance, I basically just check, hey, what's my distance between 13 and 18? In this case, it's going to be 5. You find it just by subtracting the numbers. Distance has to be positive, so even if you get a -5, it's still going to change to positive. So that makes my formula x minus my average equal to the distance or deviation. And that's it. Another real quick one, just like it, make sure that we get a really good hang of it. We have -6 and 10. So we need to find the halfway. So add both numbers and divide by 2. That should be 2. And I need to find the distance between that 2 and my 10, which is 8. And that means my formula is x minus 2 equal to the 8.